Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Sheila Hamilton. Sheila is a host of a hugely popular podcast called Beyond Well, where she also has a media company called Beyond Well Media that creates mental health content for WebMD. She does that with psychologists and psychiatrists, and it's hugely and profoundly popular. She was a popular TV host and journalist who won Emmy Awards. She's a best-selling author of 2 books, one of which is called All the Things We Never Knew, and the other one is Chasing the Chaos of Mental Illness. She went through a dramatic event when her daughter was 9 years old, and her husband at that time passed away. He died through suicide from mental illness, and that has driven her life in many ways to re-examine her own life, help us to re-examine our lives in how we cope with trauma, and to go beyond the sort of embedded idea of PTSD, which is, of course, very real, but to go on to PTSG, which is post-traumatic growth. So what is the growth that can come out of it? And in the break, Sheila and I were having a conversation about this idea of trauma. It's very real. There's no doubt about that. We all go through something. It's also how it impacts us, what we do with it, how we process it, whether we get stuck in it, whether we move beyond it, whether we bury it and deny it, whether we use it as a catalyst and a trampoline to propel us forward into something else. And also, and this is where we're going to go right now, this trap that we can fall into. I call it the American trap. And the reason I call it the American trap is because I'm not by birth American, but I fell in love with America because there was a dream of what it could be. It was an idealized life. And I think that in many ways, many of us are still living in that fantasy of what the American life is, that you grow up with a white picket fence and mom and dad love each other, and mom greets dad as he comes home from work, and there's time for the family, and there's holidays together, and there's a station wagon, and we all enjoy being in it, and we go for picnics, and dad gets a raise, and things get better. And that world doesn't exist except in a movie. My point here is that it can feel traumatic, in quotes, it can feel traumatic that the fantasy isn't real. And so let's pick that up, Sheila, because I think that that's something that's really important to you.
It's not only that it isn't real. I don't know a single individual that has it or at this stage in life still believes that it's healthy to have that fantasy. Who would want a life like that? How boring, how ordinary, how unbelievably cinematic that is the life that you have. I'm so much more interested, Dov, in your story, in what you did as a kid and how you managed to be so unbelievably imaginative to overcome your circumstances. Why do we have this, even though so many of us seem to know so much about one another's lives, why do we have this belief that it's supposed to always work out?
Yeah.
One of the things that I really had to come to Jesus about was that my grief, my trauma was not exceptional. I was not the only person who'd lost a loved one to suicide. I was not the first mother who had to learn that their kid was diagnosed with cancer. These events in our life and the suffering that we endure is the bargain we make for being human. And once I stopped believing that this was unusual or that it just happened to me, like Nancy Kerrigan said, why me? Why me? Because I'm human. Why me? Because life is filled with suffering. Why me? Because every wonderful day that I get to enjoy where I'm not sick or I have housing is a day that I am completely blessed. But the other part can and often does happen in our lives. And so I think that was one of the first things that helped me start reframing trauma, was to say, there's nothing unordinary about this. There's nothing highly unusual about it. Stop pretending it only happened to you and that you have some sort of special circumstances because you've had trauma. And this is not trauma comparing, because that's its own trap to get into.
Absolutely.
This is just acknowledging that this life is filled with suffering. And the more that we can come to grips with that, the more that we can accept that and then decide, now what's left for me, the easier we can move on from it.
That is the Buddhist philosophy, that life is suffering. And people are like, ooh, that sounds terrible. No, when you get to that, then you are drinking the sweetness fully in and not taking it for granted, and then being pissing, moaning, or whining when it's not so sweet. If you recognize that life is filled with suffering, then when it's sweet, it is so sweet. It's so beautiful. I sign all my emails with a particular signature. And part of that signature is with gratitude. That didn't come into my signature until after I fell. And I started to go, well, what am I grateful for? And I remember thinking nothing. Nothing. My life is shit. All the good things have gone. I remember going through this exercise and thinking, this is just such horseshit. I don't feel grateful for anything. And the truth is, I didn't. That wasn't a lie. I didn't feel grateful. But it was only in understanding that the darkness brings the light. In the bitterness is only way I can recognize the sweetness, that all these things are by comparison of me, not by comparison of others. It's not my life is great compared to Charlie over there who was just raped. No. My life is sweet compared to my darkness. You and I talked about before that I have siblings who had a similar childhood to me, and we're very, very different because we did different things with it. And I'm sure there's sweetness for them too. It's just different sweetness.
Yeah, I'm just going to shut up and let you talk, honestly, Dov, because I feel that way about gratitude in a way that I kind of hate how the word has been overused and people force gratitude on someone else who isn't yet there. It's that process of wanting to even search for it that I think is the key, of recognizing in yourself, I actually want to find the reasons I want to be here. I want to find what it is that makes me feel like I want to live another day on this planet. And I'm really opposed to the idea of people saying, well, you lost your home, you should have gratitude for the blah, blah, blah. No, actually, what you should do is just look around you and say, what do I really feel today in terms of who were the firefighters that were there? Who are the neighbors that are offering a room to stay in? I want people to just begin a journey of looking when they're ready and not before. Because just like you said, there are those days where you're like, I'm not grateful for anything. Right. Good. Keep searching. Keep searching the next day and the next day and the next day. And inevitably, man, it changes your life. Changes your life.
And at the same time, Sheila, it must have been very easy for the ego part of you to buy into, I got shit for luck, husband suicided, bipolar. We get through that. And now my daughter's diagnosed with cancer. Give me a break here.
But, in the way that life works out, I really believe this stuff. I don't think I would have survived my daughter's cancer if not for having to face myself after the death of my husband. I really don't. And so in some bizarre way, I was able to be present to her illness. I was present to her suffering. I was present to the fear that I had. And it was a long recovery. I'm so proud of myself for how I was during that time. And I know the woman prior to that.
Yes.
I know the woman who 10 years earlier would have been a flaming neurotic, who would have been so afraid she would not have been able to show up in the emergency room, who would have fallen apart. I was not that person because of the work I had to do, because of the early trauma with my husband. And this is kind of what I want to say to people is these times when we're being put through these burning fires, man, we're forging metal.
Yes.
We're doing such important work if you can actually grab onto who it is that I am now because of this suffering. It's so critical to recognize it, because I do feel like part of the reason she's alive today is I knew when to act. I had my senses. I was in the moment, and I really am proud of both of us for how we got through her cancer.
When we stop and we take a moment, and oftentimes we don't, part of the new age idea is be present, be in the moment. And I get that, and I understand that. And to a degree, that's true. But it's also important to understand that when it says be present in the moment, you have to be present with those feelings that come up, whatever they are. And part of that is the ability, if you're going to really develop your mental, emotional health, is to look back and see who you were. Because I am absolutely certain that I am not the man I was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I can take those evaluations and go, this X came up and I'm having a 2 response to it. And I know I would have had a disproportionate 6 or 8 response to it. And because of the work I've done, I have a 2 response to it. And is it upsetting? Yes, it's upsetting. Is it upsetting for a week? No. A day? No. A couple of hours? Maybe, but that's it. What I say to people is when you're in the thick of the shit, whatever that is that's happening at that time, I want you to do something for me just right now. And they go, what's that? I go, I want you to project yourself back 5 years and tell me how that person would have coped with this. And the answer is they couldn't. They couldn't. So my question then is this: if you can be present with this, this is preparing you for more difficult things, but for greater heights of achievement within yourself, not as in accolades, but sense of worth and ownership of your own greatness, your deep greatness to bring to the world that may not be some award or anything, but may be something profound, as in I was able to stand at the bed of my daughter while she had cancer and she was diagnosed and know that she had something solid to cling to that wouldn't have been there 10 years before.
Yeah. These days, I kind of think my next great experiment is going to be bringing that kind of presence and awareness to death. Because isn't that the biggest challenge that each of us is going to face, right? And being able to just think, I want to imagine my death as a calm thing, a loving thing, a full circle moment where I'm able to give people the feeling that what I did here on earth was worth it, but it's time to move on. And I know that it feels like, oh my God, I don't want to talk about death. But when I talk about death, when I think about my own death, I am the most alive, because suddenly my priorities for what is it that I want to do now? How do I want to be in this day? What kind of presence do I want to bring to the people I entertain for dinner or the moment that I have with my daughter? How am I going to be in this time that I have available? And honestly, it's so interesting to me how the awareness from my husband to my daughter's cancer to now I'm realizing, oh, the big thing is get ready for that. I'm not saying it's going to be imminent. I'm saying it's going to inform how I live every single day until then.
But that is pre-TSG, right?
You bet it is.
Instead of being post, it's pre. Like you're setting it up. This is going to be traumatic, and I'm going to allow it to circular.
Yeah.
Allow me to grow in this moment, because I am going to be dead at some point.
Yeah.
When that'll be 5 seconds from now or 50 years from now is not really the point. The point is that how do I want to go out from this moment knowing that I don't know when it's coming?
That's right.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
I'm thinking about what's happening right now in Los Angeles with the fires and thinking about every single day that I have a house that's still standing. I want to enjoy this house. I want to bring friends into it. I want to fill it with memories because of the climate, because of what's happening in our country with things moving so fast. Dov, I really feel a necessity to be super, super cognizant that if you have shelter, if you have your health, if you have the ability to share with other human beings, my God, we are the lucky ones right now. So how do we really use this time and this moment to be as generous as we possibly can with other human beings and our resources? And so that mindset, I don't think I would have ever wanted to think about death if I hadn't gone through what I went through. These thoughts, this sort of exploration was all because of profound trauma. I would never not want to be able to consider this.
You've said that you believe that the greatest minds are also the ones that suffer the greatest level of sadness. Talk to us a bit more about that, because I think that's important for people to grasp.
I think that people who haven't yet suffered either the kind of abuse that I hear some of my friends have suffered, the kind of neglects that I hear others have suffered, the kind of loss and uncertainty, and they haven't truly been tested as a human. I really believe that. And I think until you're tested as a human, we really don't know what is there. And so you see people who seem to be flitting along on the surface of life, and their most important thing is the paint color on their wall or where it is that they're going to travel for their vacation. And I ask, really? Really? That is the most important thing to you, not how you serve, not how you show up for your friends, not how it is that you build a legacy that's actually remembered as being kind and compassionate. Because I'm not interested in those people any longer. And lucky me, I'm at the age where I don't have to be. And so I surround myself with people who have interesting stories and fabulous lives. But man, they've been through the shit. They have been through the shit, and I love them for it.
Yeah. Don't you think, though, as you sort of look out into the world, I'm just talking about political polarization, because of course that's evident. Not the polarization is evident, but the magnification, the megaphone that's given to it is evident. But this mass indoctrination has us precariously living on the edge of we're the haves because we're not living in the street. But at the same time, that because it feels like it's so possible that we could end up there at any moment, that at a psychological survival level, it will often have us be self-protective and not as generous as we need to be. And because it becomes othering that these are the other people. If you want to make the world a better place, let me give you a really simple exercise that'll cost you nothing, but will challenge the shit out of you and go, what's that? I go, when you walk down the street and you pass a homeless person, look them in the eye and smile. Why? It's not going to cost you anything. No. Why is that so profound? It's called dignity. Give that person the dignity of seeing them as a human being. Whatever you feel is your own stuff. You want to feel guilt about it? You want to feel generous about it? That's fine. You can feel all that. But pretending they're not there has got nothing to do with them and everything to do with you.
Yeah.
And you will want to make a change in the world if you see that. The analogy I give people all the time is that back in the day when you and I can, maybe I don't know about you, but I can certainly remember the days of having a channel changer. I can even remember the time when I was the channel changer and my mum would send me to the TV, turn the channel. But, you know, there was that Sunday afternoon, it was raining and it was miserable and it was the winter and you're watching the TV and there was nothing on. You were flicking through the channels and some poverty porn came on from Africa of kids with flies on their faces and swollen bellies. And you watched it and you went, oh, that's so sad. And then you flicked over and watched Ferris Bueller or some other movie. How long can you stay on that station? I'm not saying you should donate. You can do that or not. That's up to you. How long can you stay on a station? And now let me ask you, how much difference would you be willing to make if I picked you up and instantly placed you in that village for even a couple of hours, let alone a couple of days?
Oh, it's a good question.
It's that presence with rather than the avoidance of. And really, if I'm to summarize what I really hear you talking about, Sheila, is this presence with so that we can do something about it, whether it's our own trauma, our own grief, the grief of the people we love, the trauma that we're helping somebody else with, but to be present with it is to touch the natural human soul within us that we fence off in our own protection and just say, hold on a minute, I'm going to let you in this space with me.
Yeah. You know what I learned, Dov, I was a television reporter for so many years and spent time in homeless camps and was grieving mothers of firefighters who were lost in blazes and with presidents and the world's greatest thinkers and artists. And to me, there's just no difference in people. There is no difference in people. We all truly do want the same things. We do. We want to be safe. We want to be loved. We want to have purpose. And we may like cats or dogs differently, but beyond that, we really do all want the same things. And so I feel so lucky that I've been able to just have that kind of respect and great humility for every life. I have always been that way. And I think it's made me a more sentient reporter. I think that I have learned more because of my willingness to understand that. And even today, my life is so much more filled because I have people of every single economic stripe, every single color, every single gender. I invite them all into my home on equal footing. I really believe that's not from my trauma. That's just part of who I was as that 8-year-old girl. And I really am so happy to hear you say it as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. When you look back on your life, you're an award-winning journalist. How do you think that both did not prepare you and did prepare you for understanding what you went through with David and with your daughter?
It did not prepare me to recognize and understand how to help someone with a serious mental illness. We don't talk nearly enough about it. There's not enough movies with characters written about it. There's not enough books. So I felt like that my career had not helped me prepare for actually living with someone with mental illness and being able to help them appropriately. How it did prepare me is that when the suffering occurred, I was like, this reminds me of being in the home of mothers who had just learned that they'd lost their kids in war, being in the home of husbands who had just lost their wives to a horrible rape and murder, being with mothers who'd lost their children. And so that experience of seeing loss, seeing devastation, the shock of what happens when you feel as if you're losing it all was at least familiar to me.
Yes.
And I think that's why that idea around exceptionalism with our grief and our trauma is really important to me. When you spend time as a reporter, you realize, my gosh, this every single day where there's not a horrible, horrible thing happening. It's just pure luck. It's so lucky that we have a day that seems boring. It's so unbelievably lucky. I loved my career, and it helped me to become more sensitive and empathetic to people of all kinds.
Do you do any of that kind of work now at all?
I do. I'm busy on 2 foundations that provide mental health care, and one that does a really, really good job of trying to help people who are unable to take medicine or who have found medicine unhelpful discover what they can take instead, what therapies are evidence-based and working for them. So I do an awful lot of work, continued work with people with mental illness. And then I love dogs. And so my next thing is to start fostering dogs. My big dream, Dov, is to be able to have a huge ranch where I could take in every single dog who doesn't have a home. But who knows if that one's ever going to come true.
Do you miss the reporting research side?
I don't, because I find that at different stages in your life, you have different desires. And one desire was to be on a different scene every day and interviewing people and researching. And my desire now is to slow down and really go deeply. And I feel like that's what I've been able to do in the recent books that I'm writing, is really find the magic in a sentence or the poetry of a particular thing that I'm observing. And I have loved that ability to just go a little bit slower in what I produce.
Yeah, it's really interesting as somebody who is very geopolitically interested, watching reports. I'm of the age that I remember a journalist called John Pilgeon. If you're a journalist, you probably know, but most people don't know who he was. He was a very famous Aussie, but he reported on the Vietnam War and this wonderful objectivity that we just don't see anymore. It's not that it's not there, but it's so rare now. It's interesting for me that even reporting on things like mental health, it's so one-sided. Big Pharma are a bunch of assholes who are trying to kill us. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. And on the other side is that Big Pharma is the right thing, is the only thing, and we should only vote. Okay, I can get that too. There's some value to it for sure. But what about the middle ground? What about digging in? I mean, this is why some of us love and some of us hate Pharaoh, right? People are afraid of him because if he digs into you, man, he's going to find out everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And I think that we really need that approach. We need a journalistic approach oftentimes when we're confronted with something, because everything is easy to put into a box of good, bad, right, wrong, yes, no, left, right, etc. But that's not the truth of life. And the truth of life is, this shitty thing is my husband has just suicided, and there are a million factors here that I've got to somehow work through. And it takes a journalistic and a very human, soulful, connected side to be able to do that. And in the process of investigative journalism, you probably feel like you're going to drown in everything you've got.
I want you just to preach at my local church. I feel Dov coming home. Yes, I'm not kidding you. I feel like what you just said about searching, really being dedicated to finding a middle ground is so helpful in the discussion about mental health, because you are so right. It is one camp that said there is these horrible corporate pirates who are just trying to get you hooked on drugs. And the other camp says you need to take ginger juice for your depression. I really believe this, Dov. There is a middle ground for every part of our life. And when it comes to mental health, the best thing that I've heard is, if you are going to use drugs, use them as a screwdriver, not a jackhammer, because our health can get into phases where we absolutely need the assistance of medication. We absolutely need an antidepressant to get us through the weeks and months after a horrible, horrible shock and trauma. But eventually, the skills that you learn in terms of how to live your life beyond that have to be learned. And sometimes what can happen with people is they get so dedicated to their drugs that they forget to bring the other tools along. And so I have come full circle on the question of pharmaceuticals, on the question of politics, on the question of almost everything in my life, where I see myself so centered in a camp where to say both sides have really, really good points. And I'm afraid modern journalism doesn't have many people who are willing to do that kind of investigation, except Ronan, whom I love.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. As we come to the end of the second part of the show, I want to ask you a reverse question. The question that people always ask is, what would you say to your child self? No, I'm not doing that. What would your child self say to you? What I mean by that, what would she think of the woman you've become? What would she say to the woman you've become, based on the fact that she's sitting there on the lawn or in the treehouse making her dreams and her adventures, and then she gets to meet you and hear your story of what's happened? What would she think about that?
I think she would say, thanks for coming home. You were gone for far too long. And man, that makes me so proud to be able to say, Dov, we would have such a great time together. We would swim in a lake, and we would write a story together, and we would eat popcorn with too much salt and butter, and she would be my best friend.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Sheila. It has been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Oh, Dov, you're amazing.
Thank you.
It was one of the most profound conversations I've ever had in all the times I've been interviewed. Thank you.
Well, that is very generous. Thank you so much. Again, please let people know where they can find out more about you and all your wonderful resources.
SheilaHamilton.com is the easiest, because it will lead you to my corporate page and the podcast and all of the writing and other works that I've done. Thank you, Dov.
Thank you. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, remember that those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of that tribe. Leaders who are committed to positively shifting the political and business landscape know that they've got to tap into what drives human behavior. I'm Dov Baron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified, actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and for companies. Remember, we need your help in staying relevant, so please go to wherever it is you tune into the show from and do us a favor. Rate, review, subscribe to the show, and please share the show with everybody you know. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for sharing the show with others. We really appreciate it. It does make a big difference, honestly, and we always need your help. As you may be aware, there's a lot of podcasts out there, so we need people to know about this one. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about your own mental health and the mental health of those around you, about how easy it is to deny what's going on in front of you, and in the long run, how you may be causing more pain through denial than you would be through direct ownership of what's going on, whether it's for yourself or whether it's for someone else. Mental challenges are something that are happening for all of us in some way, shape, or form. And as Sheila said, your trauma is not unique. It doesn't make you special. But I can tell you something for sure. You ain't going to be special by hiding it either. So you've got to really step into it. Take this investigative reporting mentality around it with all of your heart and with all of your soul. Be present with it. Allow yourself to feel the depth of your own sadness so that you can experience the joy and the bliss that is on the other side of that. You will never know that bliss if you're living in Pleasantville. Nothing is in full color until you can look into the darkness of your own shadow. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you, tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus and purpose, and profit in your business, in your life, in your leadership impact. And I am out.